I will send out a copy of this slideshow presentation and a copy of this webinar either later today or early Monday. You can also always come back to this chat history, and you'll be able to access the recording link from there as well. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and get started with the live events in Microsoft Teams. So let's dive right in. Just to introduce myself before we get too much further into the content, my name is Alexandra Hancock, and I'm an instructional technology trainer with the district. I've been with MCS for almost 5 years now, and it feels like every year my job is something different, and this year especially more so. But me and my department, we're here to offer webinars. If you'd like webinars, we can do one-on-one appointments. We can do small group trainings. We've made videos and handouts. We can do emails. So basically, if you need some tech help, reach out to myself or Angela or our new director, Matthew, new to the position, not new to the district, and we'll be happy to help you out where we can. So that's just a little bit about me and my role. You probably have all attended a training with me or heard of me at this point, but I just wanted you to know who was talking to you today. All right, let's go ahead and start talking about our agenda for today. So today, our agenda is we are going to distinguish again between what a live event is versus a Microsoft Teams meeting. At this point, with Microsoft Teams being kind of our district collaboration tool and how we're doing these virtual meetings, you have all probably attended a Microsoft Teams meeting. You're in one now if you have never done this before. Live events are a little different, so I want to clarify the differences. And then we're basically going to go through the live events workflow. How do you schedule the event? How do you let your attendees know about it? How do you define roles in a live event? How do you actually conduct that event? And I got some best practices. And then how do you end the event? And then what's available to you after the event is over? So we're going to go through that whole workflow, and there will be time for Q&A. And then I also have some help resources that I'm going to show you at the end. And again, you will get a copy of the slide deck, so you will have access to all those resources. Without further ado, we'll go ahead and dive in. And just as a reminder, if you have questions or if you find I'm talking too fast because I've had coffee today, please post in the chat, and I've got the chat open and I'm keeping an eye on that. All right, so let's talk about what a live event is versus a Teams meeting. And I've noticed a couple people have since joined us. Just to clarify, this webinar is not showing you how to use Teams in Schoology. This webinar is showing you how to do these live events for a larger audience. So this table here kind of compares Microsoft live events to Microsoft Teams meetings. Again, Teams meetings are something that you've probably participated in at some point now. Live events are a little bit different. Our superintendent has been doing quite a few live events for different staff and other groups. So if you've watched any of those, you might have attended a live event with her inadvertently. So the key differences here is the live event can have up to 10,000 attendees. So if you see that top row there, Microsoft Teams meetings are capped at 250 attendees. Microsoft Live events can broadcast to 10,000 people all at once. And the Microsoft Live events has 3 distinct roles. There's producers, which kind of manage the whole event and can present. There's presenters, which just present and share their voice and their content with the audience. And then everybody else is an attendee. And by default, everyone but you is an attendee. You as the event organizer actually have to come invite people to a Microsoft Teams live event. If you kind of contrast that to a Microsoft Teams meeting, with only 250 people in it, anyone in the meeting can be a presenter and an attendee, but the attendees have more that they can share with the meeting. So that's one of the distinguishing features between a live event and a Teams meeting is in a live event, you would not want to have 10,000 people with the ability to come off mute, especially if you're presenting to the public. You would not want to be able to forfeit that control. So attendees in Microsoft Live events, all they can do is watch your broadcast. They can post questions to the Q&A, but you can keep those questions anonymous or private until you would like to share them. So attendees have a much more limited role in the live event because it is going to 10,000 people, whereas in Microsoft Teams meetings, attendees can be more collaborative. They can share their microphone, they can share their camera. So at the very bottom of this table, and I apologize if my little directional control is blocking it for you as well. Really, Microsoft Teams meeting is great for collaboration and kind of, I'm going to put in quotes, smaller groups to meet. So where you want everybody to have a voice or have the opportunity to share their camera, the Teams meeting is going to be key for that. And the Teams meeting is really where the teachers and the students are going to be working when the teachers are presenting remotely to students. These live events, however, they're great for reaching a wider audience. They're great for reaching out to your parents, for your students. If you want to have a unified message that everyone in the district sees or everyone at your school site sees, these live events are really going to be key for that. And again, the superintendent has been doing quite a few of these, and that's actually where this idea for this webinar came from. Was I know a lot of administrators wanted to do this as well. So hopefully you have a little bit better perspective of a meeting versus a live event. Up until now, most everything you've done in Teams has been a meeting. These live events do take some really dedicated effort and purposeful effort to set up, so it's not something you would have inadvertently done. All right, so I don't see any questions coming in. Let's just dive right into scheduling the event. And then of course, as questions come up, I will answer them. So you've decided that you are ready to do a live event with your school site and you want students and parents to be able to see it. How do you schedule it? The first step for scheduling is going to be doing that in the Microsoft Teams app. This is not something that you can do in Outlook. This is not something that you can do on the web necessarily. You do need to open up Microsoft Teams, the actual application, and schedule it from here. If you do not have Microsoft Teams installed yet, the help desk can install it for you. At this point, I think we pushed it out in late March and now we're in August, so hopefully you have it. If not, call help desk and they will get it on your computer for you. And just this is a quick reminder here, to find Microsoft Teams, you can click your start menu and scroll through your app list to find it, or you can use that Cortana search at the bottom there to search for Microsoft Teams. And if it's your first time ever launching the app, you will need to sign in. That'll be your username or your district email and your password. And then once you sign in, same password. Once you sign in, Teams should launch. However, sometimes it starts running in the background. It doesn't always fully open up. So you can always access it down below as well on your taskbar. If you hit that little up arrow, there is going to be a little Microsoft Teams logo. When you click on that, that will launch Microsoft Teams for you. Once you have Teams open, you actually schedule this in the calendar in Teams. So you're going to go into the calendar on the left-hand side there. And in the calendar, there is a purple new meeting button. You're not going to click new meeting because we don't want to do a Teams meeting. You're going to click that down arrow next to the new meeting button there, and you're going to pick live event. I'm not sure that had that little radio broadcast tower. Once you select that down arrow and you pick live event, your event window is going to pop up. And this might look similar to like an Outlook event window if you set up an Outlook event, but basically we just need to work through some items here. So the first thing is going to be your title, and that would be the title of your live event. So, maybe welcome back to school, or, Mohai Panthers are awesome, or what have you. The title will be visible to your attendees as well. So just make sure it's relevant to the event and of course appropriate. And then once you pick your title, you're going to want to pick the date and time that this event starts and ends. Again, your attendees are going to be able to see this date and time. So it is a good idea to, if you want it to start, Monday at 8:30, you're going to want to go ahead and make sure that it's scheduled for Monday 8:30, and you want to make sure that it's scheduled for about the hour or however long you think the event will be, so that the audience has the expectation of when this will start and how long it will be. And then number 5 there, you can add details. These details are not visible to your attendees. So the date and the time and the title are. The details would be more private for you and any other presenters that you included in this live event. Once you had your date, your time, your description in there, if you added a description, that is optional. Then the next step is to invite other people you would like to present with you. You do have to invite presenters to this event and give them the presenter role. Otherwise, they're going to be attendees by default. So you do want to bring in all your presenters ahead of time. And there's just an invite presenters box there. You'd click and type in the name of whoever you'd like. It does tie to our district directory, so you should be able to find anybody. And then they'll start to show up in that list down below. And I know it's a little bit hard to see on my tiny slide here, but underneath their name, you're going to be able to pick their role. You're going to be able to decide if they're a producer or if they are a presenter in this live meeting. And we'll talk about what that means in just a minute. Once you are done with all of those details, you will hit next to move on to the next step. I would just like to note that at any point you can come back and edit these details. And at any point, you can come back and invite presenters. So if you just want to get this set up and figure out who your presenters are later, you can do that at any point up until the event starts. Once the event starts, then it becomes much more difficult to bring in ad hoc presenters. So you would want to invite them ahead of time, which is a good practice because then it would be on their calendar for them anyway, so that they know when this live event is going to be. Once you hit that next button, kind of backing up a slide here, once we hit that next button, the next step here is to establish the live event permissions. So who is actually going to be able to watch this event? The default there is org-wide, which means anyone with an @Monet email is going to be able to watch this. They will have to sign in. Again, in my mind, a lot of the ways these are going to be used is for the public. Any student or parent could be able to join this so that you can have that larger audience. So generally, I recommend setting this to public so they don't have to have an MCS email to be able to access the live event. However, there might be cases where your live event does need to be more restricted, so you could drop that down to org-wide, or you could drop it down even more and just say certain people and groups can watch this live event. But my thinking is we've got 10,000 attendees here. I'm probably going to want this to be more open in most cases. Once we figure out our permissions, the next step there is deciding how we want to produce our live event. You're going to leave that radio button up to Teams. You want to produce it through Microsoft Teams, so you can use the Teams app. And then you have some different checkboxes there you can customize. So the first checkbox right away is recording available to producers and presenters. You'll notice you cannot change that. This is going to record by default, and you're going to get a copy of that recording whether you like it or not. But below that, you can decide whether or not you want your attendees to be able to see the recording. And we'll talk about how they would see that recording later. And then you can turn on captions as well. So technology and AI algorithms with text-to-speech have come amazingly far. So you can turn on captions, and as you're speaking, it will automatically caption for you. I do recommend having that turned on, just for if you have any viewers that are deaf of heart or hard of hearing, they're going to be able to read those captions. And while it won't be a perfect capture of exactly what you're saying, it's going to be close enough that they'll get the message. So you'll pick your spoken language. The default there is English. You could change it to Spanish if you're planning on doing a Spanish broadcast. And then right below that, you see a drop box there, translate to, and you can pick up to 6 languages. So if you know that you're going to have some Spanish speakers and some Farsi speakers and maybe some different Hmong speakers with some of the different languages we have in the Valley, you can pick up to 6 languages. And again, technology is amazing. So as you're speaking, AI is live translating your voice into the written text of those 6 languages. So when an attendee comes in, they can go into closed captions, they can pick the language they would like to read this in, and they will hear your talk in English, of course, but then they're going to be able to see that text in their own language, which this is like Star Trek stuff to me. It's amazing that we have the technology to do live translation like that. Again, it's not going to be perfect. It is an algorithm that's doing this. It's not perfect, but it is going to be close enough that they're going to be able to tell more or less what you're saying, and they'll be able to follow along. The next checkbox there, we got 2 checkboxes left, and then we'll move on. The next one there is the attendee engagement report. That basically just gives you some information about how attendees joined, how long they stayed, how well they participated. Might as well keep it on. My idea is more information is always good information. And then that final checkbox there is off by default, but you can turn on a Q&A so that your audience can ask questions. This is going to be text-based, so they do have to type the question. So I do recommend turning that on to give your audience a chance to speak. Of course, via text. So they can ask the questions. And then once you've worked through these 2 different steps here, you'll scroll down and you can hit number 3 to schedule this event. So once you hit schedule, this event is now on your calendar, and it's now ready for when you're ready to go live. The next thing I kind of want to clarify, I see a good question came in, is captioning available in Teams meeting, or is this live events only? Right now, this is only a live events feature. I don't know if Microsoft plans on bringing captioning to the Teams meeting. That's a really good question, but right now that's not an option. So we talked about, kind of jumping back into my slide deck, we talked about when you bring people in, excuse me, When you bring people into the meeting, you get to decide if they are a producer or a presenter, and then everyone else is an attendee by default. So I just want to clarify here the difference between producer and presenter. So the producer basically has all the superpowers. As you can see here with all these different capabilities, the producer can do it all. They can start the event, they can end the event, they can preview the event, they can view the live attendees, they can share their audio. Basically, they've got all the superpowers. The presenters are a little bit more limited. So the presenter cannot start the event. You need a producer to start the event. The presenter can't end the event. They can't view the event preview. And you'll see that they also can't view the live attendee count. So they have a little bit more limited information and a little bit more limited capacity. But they can still share their screen, they can still share their audio, they can still share the sounds their computer is making, they can mute the other presenters, and they can help you moderate the Q&A, which is kind of helpful to have. So that just kind of helps distinguish the role of producer, presenter. Producer kind of does everything. The presenter is really focused on just presenting the content and maybe helping actually moderate that live event. And then anyone who isn't one of these two things, and again, you have to actively make people either a producer or presenter, anyone who is not that is an attendee. And you'll see my little helpful tip popped up here. I think I mentioned this earlier, but I do recommend having at least one other person with you on this. If it's just you, it can be a lot to present and talk and manage the chat and the Q&A and type out answers and all of that. So it is helpful to have at least one other person. Whether you make them producer or presenter is up to you, but then you at least have somebody else who can help out with that. So I do recommend that. And again, anyone who is not a producer or a presenter in Teams, the Teams live event is an attendee. And attendees, basically all they do is watch the broadcast, turn on the captions that we just talked about, and post questions in the Q&A. That's all they get to do. So they basically just get to sit back and receive the information. All right, I'm going to pause here. Actually, let me go through this next piece and then we'll pause for questions. So once we have this live event set up, we've got our roles kind of established. How do I get this information out to my attendees? Whatever marketing you're used to using is going to work just fine. You can market this on your school website. You can send out a newsletter to staff if that's how you want to do it. You know, if you use social media with your school site at all, you could post this on social media. What you need, though, for them is a link. And to get to that link to actually share with them, you're going to come back to your Teams event and you are going to find that event in your calendar. So come back to Teams, come back to your calendar. You're going to look for that live event. You're going to be able to tell it's a live event because it's going to have that little radio broadcast tower in the very bottom corner. And you're just going to double click on that to open up the event information. Once we have this open here, you'll notice in that very top box is your invite attendees box. All you need is this attendee link. When you click on that purple text that says get attendee link, that is going to copy the link to your clipboard. And then at that point, you are free to paste this wherever you're marketing this event. So like I said, if it's going on Facebook, post this link on Facebook. If it's going out via email, put it in your email. If it's going on your school site webpage, go ahead and post it there. So this is the link that you want. You want to make sure it's the attendee link. You don't want to send out any other links to this because you don't want to accidentally give your attendees other permissions. Basically, you'll just grab this link and then again, just blast it out wherever, however you communicate with your students and parents normally. Or your staff if you want to do this for your staff first. And then once you have that, you can close that up and you finish your marketing. So at this point, I'm going to take a quick pause here and see if there's any questions. At this point, if there are, feel free to come off mute and ask them out loud or go ahead and post them in the chat. We'll give about 30 seconds to a minute or so for this. Okay, I'm not seeing anything come in. If you do decide to come up with something, go ahead and post it in the chat and I'll get back to you. All right, so now it's the day of the live event. And I want to start to set up my live event before my attendees get there. So how do we start setting up this event? We've marketed it really well. People are really excited to hear from their principal, their school site. They're super excited. So now we need to get this set up so it's a good event for our parents and students. How do we do that? So my recommendation, and I do this for any webinar that I'm a part of or any training that I'm doing that's virtual, and actually in person too, I recommend getting into this event at least 20 minutes before the scheduled start time. That gives you time to get in, get your content set up, make sure all your presenters show up, make sure you kind of are oriented to what you're looking at, and then once it's time, you should be ready to go live. So to get into the event, it's that same, we're going to revisit this calendar event quite a bit. I'm going to come back to Teams. I'm going to come back into the calendar, and I'm going to come back into that event that I posted on my calendar. And just double click on it, and that will open up this event invite here. So let's say this one's scheduled for 11 a.m. So it's 10:30. I'm ready to get in. All I have to do is click that join link, and that will let me come in because I'm a producer. Any of my presenters can do the same thing. They just come into their calendar, they find the event, they click join, and they will be brought into the presenter side of things. Once you come in as a producer, excuse me, sorry, I got a little frog in my throat. Once you come into the live event producer view, this is the screen that you're going to see here. So you'll notice it does look a little bit different than a Microsoft Teams meeting screen. You're going to have two screens that you see here, and we're going to kind of take a quick tour of this. This is the producer view, just to clarify. So this is that top level maximum power view. So the first thing that we're going to see is two different screens. The screen on the left there where my yellow number 1 popped up is the queue. So essentially you can kind of preload content into this screen so you see how it looks before you send it live. Once you send it live, this second screen here, this is your live event screen. This is what your attendees are seeing. So right now we can see this live event hasn't started. That's exactly what your attendees see if they click on this link early. Down below, my number 3 popped up, is where you will see all of the different producers and presenters. You'll see them come in there. You'll see if they're muted and unmuted. You'll see their video feed if they're sharing their webcam, and you'll see any content that they're sharing. And that will all show up down there for you to queue up into this queue here. Where the number 4 showed up there is your different tools where you can share content from your computer screen, or you could mute everybody. If you've got your presenters all chatting with each other before this starts, you can mute them all if you need to do that. Number 5 is your little live indicator. So right now it says pre-live, it's in yellow, it says pre-live. That lets you know that you are not currently live yet. Once you go live, of course, that will say live. Number 6 is your start button. You'll notice it's grayed out because we don't have any content yet that we're ready to start. You can start this event at any point. So if you come in, if you schedule the event for 11, but you come in at 10:30, you're ready to start at 10:40, you absolutely can start it at any point. You don't have to wait for that start time. But in my mind, it is a good practice to wait till right around that start time because that's when your attendees are expecting to see the content. And then number 7, all those little icons there are a bunch of different tools. We're going to take a look at one of those tools a little bit later, but they're just basically some additional pieces of information for you as the producer. Like one of them, it looks like the little heartbeat monitor. That is your network health monitor, so you can see that if you have a really good stable connection. And to actually add content, I'm just going to walk you through the steps of actually adding content so that we can kind of start to get ready. The first thing that you're going to do is come into that share button down at the bottom. Once you click on that share button, it will behave like anytime you've tried to share in Microsoft Teams, you'll see everything that's open on your computer, and you can pick an item and you could, of course, share it. And it's going to show up in that little content area down there. You can only share one item at a time. Just like with Microsoft Teams, you can't share multiple items. You can share one item at a time, but any other presenter could also share their content. So you can see all the different pieces of content layered down there. I did get a question of, can I queue up materials this way? Unfortunately, because you can only share one piece of information from your computer at a time, you can't queue up a bunch of materials, but you could queue up each of your presenters because they would each be able to queue one piece of material. So number 1, I hit the share button, I find what I want to share, and then I load it into the queue. So it shows up there in the queue. I just pick on the content once it's loaded down here. I select the content and it shows up on that queue screen up there at the on the left-hand side. The third thing that I could do is, let's say I wanted to personalize this a little bit, wanted to add a video feed, I could do that as well. So where that number 3 popped up, there's 2 little computer screen kind of samples. The one that's currently highlighted in purple is just my desktop or just my screen. So I'm just seeing that. And if I wanted to switch to allow for a video feed, I'd pick the one next to that that looks like a computer screen that's kind of got a little divider in it. And then I could pick a video feed from down below from any of my presenters, and I could share. Oh no, has my screen gone blank for you guys? Okay, let me try and reshare this. I apologize. Makes it a whole lot more difficult to understand what I'm talking about when you can't see what I'm sharing with you. I'm going to go ahead and switch and do it this way. You should hopefully be seeing my PowerPoint at this point. And let me go live with this screen. And I'm going to pull up the chat on my phone now because I'm sharing this a little bit different way. And I'm going to make sure that we can all see this now before we continue. Okay, looks like yes, we're able to see it. I apologize that your screen was blank. That's a little bit frustrating. Okay, so I'm going to just quickly redo this tour. So were you guys able to see the initial tour, or do you need me to just show you how we shared content? Where did I lose you guys? I'm going to keep an eye on the chat real quick. Or somebody wants to come off mute really quickly and tell me, do I need to redo this whole piece, or was it just the next slide? Share content. Okay, perfect. Thank you for clarifying. So we're just going to hop into the next slide here. Okay, there we go. So to share content, to start sharing, I'm going to pick my piece of media that I would like to share. Down here at the bottom, I'm going to pick the share button. And just like with Microsoft Teams, when I share stuff, I get a little pop-up of all the different content that's on my computer that I could share. So then I would pick whatever I'd like to share, and it's going to show up in this content feed here. Again, each presenter can also share their own content. So everyone could queue up one item from their computer that they would like to share, and it's all going to show up down here. To actually add that content to the queue, you just click on the content right here in that little stream down below. So where my number 2 is, I would just click on that content and that would load up in the queue. Again, to share your video feed along with your PowerPoint presentation or your computer screen, where my number 3 just popped up is where you can choose if you would like to add a video feed. Again, where the purple is selected is just the content is the full screen. If I'd like to add a video feed, I would select that little tiny icon next to it right here. This will allow a little sidebar to pop up here where I could then pick a video feed from down below. So all my presenters would be down here. They would all hopefully have their videos on, and then I could pick anyone with their video. I could select them and they would pop up on the kind of right-hand side of the screen. Unfortunately, I couldn't show that because I made this on a device that did not have a computer. So that's queuing up content. This content still isn't on our live event screen, and we still have not actually gone live yet. So we're still just in the preparation stage. The next step of the preparation stage is to actually send this live here. So we click this button here, and that sends whatever's on this screen, video feed and all, over to this live event screen. And at that point, we're almost ready to go live. So once we send our content over, this is what we're going to see here. So here's our queue. Here's our live event content. However, we are still in pre-live mode. Our little live indicator up at the top still says we're pre-live. We are almost ready to start. So I've come in here, I've got my presenters, you know, it's about 11 o'clock, it's maybe a minute before, and I'm ready to go live. Once I'm ready for my audience to actually see what I'm broadcasting, I click that start button. And you'll notice once I add this content here, I can now click start. So once I click start, my screen is going to change, and you'll notice there is a little pop-up here that showed up. And this is important, once you go live, you cannot stop and start. So don't hit that start button until you're ready to go live, and you won't want to end it until your event is fully over. This is one of the ways that we're a little bit different than a Teams meeting. A Teams meeting, you can kind of come in and out of as much as you want. This is kind of a one-time thing. Once you start, you are locked in until you end. And then once you end, that event is over and the link only brings up the recording. It doesn't take you back into the event anymore. So that's just one thing to keep in mind. Don't hit start until you're ready, because you don't want to have to try and get a new link out to people in case you mess up. And then one other thing to note is there is a little bit of a delay. Just in the way that some of this live broadcasting stuff works is there tends to be a little bit of a delay. So give it about 10 to 20 seconds after you hit that start button before you start speaking. That way your audience won't miss anything that you said. And then at that point, how can I tell I'm live? So I hit the start button. How can I tell I'm live? Hopefully you guys have noticed the screen looks a little different. Our pre-live button is now red. We are now live. And our live event, the little color box around that screen, is also red. So that indicates we are now live. People are seeing what we are presenting. One other little tiny thing changed, and it's a little bit hard to see here. Let me try and zoom in on it. Next to that live event indicator here that we talked about, you'll see we have one attendee and the event name here. Next to that is that little red recording circle. When that turns red, that's going to let you know that we're also recording this event in addition to being live. So the recording is already happening. I did not have to do anything to start that. All right, so we are now live. So now whoever's speaking would come off mute. They'd start presenting our 5 ways to be a super digital student, and our audience would be seeing that. And there's the 2 things that I just highlighted. So what does it look like for the attendees? So really briefly, I just want to show you the attendee side of this live event, just so you get an idea of what that looks like for them. So the attendees, they can view they can view this online, or if they had their own Teams app, they could view it in the Teams app. In this case, I'm just assuming, this is a parent, they just joined on the web. So this is what the live interface looks like for them. My number 1 popped up down below is their video controls. So they can pause the video, they can mute and unmute, they can see that it is live, and then they do have the video timeline here. This does have a DVR function, so they could rewind. So let's say they joined 5 minutes late, they could grab this little bubble here and they could drag it back to the 5 minutes in the beginning and kind of rewatch what they missed. At the other end of this little timeline here, they do have the closed captions, so they could see those in English. Or they could pick one of the 6 languages that you allowed captions to be in. And of course, they could go full screen. So those are the different video controls that they have. Number 2, they can choose to leave the event if they would like. They don't have to press leave. They can also just close out. Or there's a little need help link there if they need help. And then finally, they can access this chat area. There is going to be some icons up here in the corner. If they would like to open up the chat, they click the little chat icon, and then this live event Q&A shows up here. And in this, where my number 4 is, this is where they can post their own question. So they can give you their name. They don't have to, but they can give you their name. They can type out their question. They could choose to post it completely anonymously if they like, and then they just do that little paper airplane to send this question over to you. Again, this question shows up privately at first, so they could say all kinds of horrible things. Let's hope not, but they could, and it's not going to be visible to the public until you make that publicly visible. And you don't have to make that publicly visible. And then number 5, they can see their questions, or they could go to featured and they could see any questions that you have published or any text-based announcement that you have made during this live event. All right, I'm going to pause here again just to see if any other questions came in. And again, feel free to come off mute at this point if you have a question. Okay, I don't see anything. So far we've gone over, we just kind of went over setup and going live. The final part of going live is going to be moderating that Q&A as attendees post questions to you, and that'll be relatively easy, but let's talk about how we moderate that Q&A. So now back on the producer side of things, we talked about all these little fancy tools up at the top here, and one of those tools is just going to be this question and answer bubble. If you click on that question and answer bubble, the live event Q&A is going to open up here. So you click on that, and then you'll see here any new questions you have, any published questions you pushed out to everybody, and then any questions you dismissed. We're going to click on new, and then you'll see these little question cards pop up with all the questions coming in. And you'll see that you do have the option to see who posted the question and what it was. You could privately reply to just that person if you would like. You could dismiss the question if it's not relevant or it's something you already covered or it was a rude comment. Or if you'd like to publish the question and your answer, you could publish that, and then everybody who's watching the live stream would be able to see it. So it's not until you hit publish that they could see that question. And then finally here, make an announcement number 5. If you just realized as you're presenting, let's say you referenced a website or something like that, or you want to post a text-based announcement, you can use this number 5 here to just post a text comment out to everyone who's watching, and they would be able to see that. So that's our live event. We're sharing content, we're flipping through content, we're watching the Q&A. The event is now over and we need to end the event. So how do I end the live event? Ending the event, I think, is the easiest thing of all. Of everything that we've talked about so far, there is a big red end button on the producer side. All you do is click end, and again, give it about 10 to 20 seconds, and at that point, the event is over. The attendees will get a note, the attendees screen will tell them the live event has ended. Your event will end here, and at that point, the recording will start processing and the event is over. If you would like to come back and see kind of some post-event information, you can do that once this event is over. So to find the event resources after the event, I keep promising you we're going to come back to this calendar event, and we're still going to do that. We come back into the calendar and back into the event once it's over. Once we come back into the event, you'll notice it looks a little bit different. We still have the button there to join, but that button's not going to work anymore because the event is over. But if we scroll down a little bit, we now have all these live event resources that became available to us. These are only here after the event ends. And you'll notice you have some different download options. So number 4 there, you can download the recording of this event. You can download the Q&A report. And then if you enable this attendee engagement report, you can get a copy of that as well. So these are all just downloads, and they give you some different information. If you would like the attendees to be able to see the recording, you're going to have the option to enable or disable that functionality here. So right now, it is enabled because we have the option to disable it. And the way that the attendees can get to that recording is they can actually use that attendee link. So the same link that you just publicized everywhere, they can come back to that link and watch the previous version of this. I believe from my notes that I have on this, this recording is available for up to 180 days. At that point, after 180 days, that link would no longer work for them, but you can come in and download this recording, and you could make this recording available elsewhere. So you could then put this recording on YouTube or the website or something like that. Where my number 6 is you could get a copy of the transcript. So that kind of AI generated captions, you're going to get a copy of that. And then you do have some advanced options as well tied to these live event resources. And then once you're finished taking a look at all of these, you can go ahead and close this out because you won't need these resources anymore. And at any point, again, you can come back to this calendar invite. These are going to be available to you. Again, the recording, I believe, is available for 180 days. Everything else will be available here permanently. So that is our workflow. So we talked about setting up the event, scheduling the event, how to assign different roles in the event, how to actually set up the event before your attendees come in, how to send that live and conduct that live, how to moderate the Q&A as those questions come in, and then how to formally end that event and see the resources. However, personally, I learn better by doing, especially with something like this live event thing. So what I've done in this slideshow presentation here is this slide here has a step-by-step resources page for you. And this will take you to websites that have videos on this topic and have step-by-step instructions on how to do everything here. So step 1 would be your scheduling. Step 2 would be getting the attendees, marketing to them and inviting them. Step 3 and 3A are going to be producing the live event, or if you're that presenter role, how to present in the event. And then step 4 is once the event is over, how do you manage the recording and the reports? So all kinds of step-by-step information here. And then my biggest tip is before you do this with parents and students and kind of the, a live event that would really matter, I recommend finding a colleague or two and just do a test event. If you can get together in the same room and still stay socially distant, have one of you be the producer, have one of you be the attendee, and you just kind of sit and play with it and figure out how it really works and figure out a best workflow for you. And that's kind of my best tip here. If you can't find a colleague in the same room, you could still do a test event, just, do it remotely and act like you really are going live with parents and students. That'll work just fine as well. That's kind of my best tip here is come back through these step-by-step resources, watch this recording again when you get a copy of this recording, and just practice and see how it goes. That way, when you're ready to do an event with parents and students, you're confident in how all this will work. At this point, the webinar is, I've covered everything that I need to go over with you, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. I've got the chat open here, so I can go ahead and answer them in the chat. Or if you want to come off mute, you can do that. I already see one coming in. Is this webinar available to watch later? Yes, I am recording this webinar. I'm going to go ahead and actually, I'll wait till we answer some questions, but I will stop that recording here soon. And either later today or early on Monday, I will send you a follow-up email with a link to this recording, as well as a link to the PowerPoint that I used. Additionally, if you come back to this chat history, there will also be a link to the webinar recording in the chat history. At the very beginning of the chat history, it'll say the recording has started. You can always come back to that and watch it there too. But I will email you the recording as well. Any other questions? Don't be shy. You can come off mute and ask it out loud. All right, well, thank you everyone for your time. I know we're scheduled to go till 2 o'clock, but I'm sure none of you are going to be upset about an extra 15 minutes of work time. So if you feel like you got what you need from this, feel free to go ahead and leave the call. I will hang out in case anyone has a sudden question they'd like to ask, or a follow-up piece they would like to ask. Otherwise, thank you very much for your attendance, and feel free to reach out to me with any questions. I'm also happy to be an attendee in a practice session you set up, or I'm happy to meet with you one-on-one to go over this. Thank you very much.